The "we only need X signings to win the league" portion of Arsenal's fan base have been having a very decent window this time around. No doubt about it. Amongst those requested and delivered, we have a striker, a replacement for he who shall not be named. We've got goalkeeping reinforcement and managerial reinforcement, mind you. The annual Chelsea clearance sale has bore fruit. So where does this leave Arsenal? Are they doing enough? Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome back. I am pleased to announce that I have watched the latest Superman movie and it's pretty good. I enjoyed it. I know that's why you clicked on the video. Subscribe. Let's start with Gyökeres, the most annoying transfer saga of any player in this window by far. This saga went on for longer than Man United's pursuit of Nicolas Gaitan and Wesley Sneijder. If you're old enough to know what I'm talking about, congratulations, you're a war hero. You get no awards though. Sorry about that. If there are any Portuguese watching this video, you need to explain something to me. So we all had to rely on Portuguese journalists and reporters to get all the information that was going on with this saga, and I just felt so confused following all the updates. It felt like every single day the deal was collapsing and then just came up again and then collapsed all over again, and the wording was just so strange. I felt like those journalists, they must have known that we know that they're just lying through their teeth the whole time. It's so strange. So this is a bit of a side note, but I guess it's not really because it is related. I've always marveled at the bravado and the environment that some of these journalists work in the football industry. Of course, this is not a Portuguese thing. As a matter of fact, the English press can be worse, the Spanish press can be worse. Everyone is like this. But it's almost like there are no repercussions whatsoever if you just straight up make things up or lie. Because, I mean, number one, odds are you have a 50-50 chance of being correct, right? The player goes or they don't go. But even if you just make things up, it doesn't really benefit any of the clubs that are involved in this transaction to come out and refute that statement. Because if they do, then they could be decreasing their leverage in the public eye at the very least for getting this deal over the line or getting the best deal for themselves. And if the journalist happens to be correct, then it also doesn't really help any of the club situations for the same reason. So journalists can just go ahead and lie, and really what's going to happen to them? They might not get fed that much information from the clubs for future deals. But again, in an attention economy, does that even matter? Because you're going to get your clicks and your views and everything else, and then you can just repeat the cycle over and over again. It's modern day journalism, I guess. Which is also probably as good a time to remind you that I'm not a journalist at all, I'm an internet clown, so don't get us confused. Now, I don't doubt that this was a very complicated procedure between both Sporting, Gyökeres, and Arsenal, especially for Sporting and the player, because the two parties seem to be consistently feuding with each other, right for everyone in the public to see, all while the journalists and reporters were either, agreeing with them or refuting what these guys were saying themselves. To all of us, this was just so strange considering how it all ended. According to the reports, the fracas started because Gyökeres believed he had an agreement with Sporting that would allow him to leave for £52 million plus 10 million in add-ons. In the end, Arsenal fans no longer had to hit the refresh button because he was bought for £55 million and 7 million in add-ons. But if we're all being completely honest, that's kind of a bargain. All that for the highest scoring striker in all of Europe over last year with 39 goals in the league. 97 goals and 28 assists in just 102 appearances over the last 2 seasons. No matter how all the rivals want to spin this is an unbelievable acquisition. No Benjamin Šeško, no Ollie Watkins, no Alexander Isak, but this guy is a real threat to the league, no doubt about it. Most of his goals are pure striker finishes. They rely on positioning, instinct, power, and accuracy. All of these are characteristics that Arsenal have really lacked in the striking position pretty much throughout the entirety of the Arteta era. Consistently, at the very least. And I know I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay, the guy hasn't even stepped out into the Emirates in an Arsenal shirt yet in the Premier League. But he attacks spaces without prejudice. He can and will score the ugly goals that are often never talked about, but that often have way more weight than a glorious overhead kick that is talked about years later in a long season, for example. Will he be afforded as much space in the Premier League as he has been given in Portugal? Obviously not. But I don't think that's a problem. He'll take some time to adapt. I do hope that he takes a bit of time to adapt, maybe like a year, maybe 2, maybe 3. And another thing I find quite strange is all the discourse around the guy's age. He's 27 years old. Like, the way people talk about him and how terrible of an investment it is to go for someone of his age, you'd think that he can already see the light and he's walking towards it. It's really, really common for strikers to only really know how to use their physical and mental assets by the time they hit their mid to late 20s. Not everyone can be a Harry Kane or an Erling Haaland or whatever. I was quite the fan of how Havertz started last season. I even made a dedicated video on it. It's no secret at this point, but Havertz does lack a lot of those characteristics that you would attribute to a natural number 9, which isn't really his fault because he's not a striker, surprise, surprise. But that doesn't mean that he's not going to play there this year, in rotating games or however that may happen, or perhaps next to Gyökeres, depending how the season goes and how Arsenal shape up, which I think is a really good thing. Because the one thing that nobody can take away from Havertz, and I will fight you on this, is that his best characteristic is his ability to find space in between the lines as an attacker at the very least, and that could do a lot of damage for opponents. Arsenal also had Mikel Merino step into the centre-forward position, and he did surprisingly well, actually, considering the fact that I believe that was the first time in his senior career that he played there, at least according to Transfermarkt. But all the same, it was also quite obvious that this was a stopgap. But that also brings into question how Arsenal will adapt after having played arguably their best football in the past 20 years, over the last 4 years, without a consistent out-and-out striker. Because now they have one. Now, I only mention that because it's part of public discourse, but in my mind, I don't think they'll have that much of a problem adapting because Gyökeres is a quality player and quality players find ways to adapt. It's sort of like different circumstances, of course, but it's sort of like how everyone was saying that Man City wouldn't be able to adapt to having a striker of Erling Haaland's form just because he didn't really fit that mold of that really, really quick passing, high tempo game that everyone thought he wouldn't be able to adapt to. Well, he broke every record in his first season. Again, not saying that's what Gyökeres is going to do, but he'll be fine. Like I said, hopefully he'll be fine in, a year, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. We're not counting at this point. But that is not all for Arsenal. By the Swede's side, he will have the most unnecessarily controversial signing of the year, Noni Madueke. Madueke is also a very good player, Premier League proven, all that good stuff. Now, the general feeling, I think when the transfer first happened, was that people were expecting him to be backup for Saka. I don't think you pay £50 million for someone to be backup. I think the intention was for him to play quite a lot of games, and Arsenal will be playing a lot of games. They're in every competition, but I think it's a bit more than that. Now, if you take a look over here and you look at Madueke versus Gabriel Martinelli's stats over last year, you see that there isn't really that much of a difference. Now, Madueke does play on the right primarily, but he can play on the left. In fact, he did do for Chelsea quite a few times. Over here, we can take a look at his stats compared to Leandro Trossard. I think it's quite obvious that the plan here is just overall depth as opposed to just one position. Yes, they overpaid, but that is the cost of doing business for a guy like Madueke, who, by the way, is now classified as homegrown. The hate that this guy was getting at the heat of it was just ridiculous. People were signing petitions to boycott it. Guys, you can't be doing that. All right, Arsenal fans already have a bad reputation online and in the wild. Let's not make it worse. Okay, my own brother is an Arsenal fan, and he's insane, but I know there are good ones out there. Now on to Martin Zubimendi, another really brilliant player that they've got on. Another player that Arsenal also had a long winding transfer saga with, but I think this one was a little bit less high profile because I don't think anybody had any doubt that he was going to end up at Arsenal eventually, but it would just take a bit of time. Of course, he's coming in as the direct replacement for Thomas Partey. I don't want to spend too much time saying things that everybody already knows about the Partey situation. Zubimendi, the man is great at so many things, and he is a really cool customer, isn't he? Every time I've watched him play, either in the Euros or the Nations League, he's been a really good standout for that Spanish side. And plus, as is implied, he is Spanish, so he gets automatically plus 15 in his hype and aura ratings, just as a birthright, I guess. Another Spaniard and assistant manager in Kepa has arrived. By the way, this man is still the most expensive goalkeeper in the world, and Arsenal got him for £5 million. Now that's a deal. On to Mikel Arteta. Genuinely speaking, I do think that it is kind of now or never. Now, over the past couple of months, ever since Liverpool wrapped up the league right before the season ended, you heard a lot of people make jokes and, make light of Arsenal and the fact that they haven't really achieved silverware in the past 5 years, despite being the second best team in England consistently. And they are jokes, but there is truth to them. You know, I do personally believe in Arteta. I think he deserves a lot more credit than people have given him for the fact that, for example, last season with all the injuries going on and all the shuffling that he had to do to his squad and all the tactics he had to overhaul, the fact that Arsenal kept picking up points and finished the season in second, whereas teams like Man City just couldn't handle having those kinds of setbacks, it speaks volumes, right? Arsenal lost their two best players simultaneously, but was still picking up points and winning. Man City lost Rodri. I'm just using Man City as an example. Man City lost Rodri and everything fell apart. Apart from that, Arteta has shown that he is detail-oriented and he can really improve players. But clearly, it just hasn't been enough for the Gunners. Then again, is that about to change? Look over here. This is the potential team that Arsenal have at their disposal going into the 25-26 football season. It's just a draft, but in my eyes, this is 1,000% a team with title-winning capabilities. And there is even still talk of them trying to get in Eberechi Eze, which is all well and good calling them a title-winning team. The only issue with that is that there are, at the very least, 2 other title-winning teams in the league right now. So, will it happen? Time will tell. There we have it. Arsenal are in for a very, very exciting season. For their sake, let's see if they can deliver. And, by the way, if you're having a bad day today, just remember, it could be worse. You could be Newcastle.
You have to sell.
You don't have to sell this summer. It's all paper nonsense. You haven't got a clue.
That's all for me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.